Harry horror show rolled into New York last night. And I say horror show for him because if he was ever worried about being the spare within the royal family, then just take a look at his face here as he arrived at the time event where he was playing second fiddle as ever to his wife. That's the look on his face when he comes to the understanding that he's not going to get any special treatment now that he's simply a little bit of royal arm candy for Ms. Markle.
Every now and then, something happens in the Meghan Markle story that stops even the most seasoned royal watchers dead in their tracks. And it's not shock from the unexpected, it's something far more pointed. It's that feeling when you realize every move looks too perfectly timed, too sharp, too calculated to be anything but intentional. The boldness behind it is impossible to ignore, and people just can't stop talking about it. Picture this. Over in the peaceful Norfolk countryside, the Prince and Princess of Wales just dropped some of the most stunning photos the royal world has seen in a long time. A little boy, gap-toothed and giggling, sitting on a log in a sun-soaked woodland. Prince Louis, 7 years old. Pure joy on his face, the kind of image that stops your scroll instantly. The world melted. Comments flooded in by the thousands. Royal fans from London to Los Angeles were sharing those pictures, gushing about how fast he's growing.
I think a confession for you today that I could very comfortably say is I'm the happiest that I've ever been. And that part, to have a partner and a husband who is just so supportive and to have healthy kids that are so joyful in the freeness of their life and the safety of their life that we create for them, of all the things that have happened in my life, I never would have imagined getting here at this point. I would feel just so happy and grateful, and I really do.
How much he looks like his dad, how that smile could light up a whole room. By every measure, it was an uncontested royal moment. His day, his spotlight. And then right on cue, Meghan Markle walked onto a stage in New York City and made absolutely sure every single eye shifted straight to her instead. What followed triggered a wave of serious criticism from royal commentators, family insiders, and people who know Meghan closer than almost anyone. People like her half-sister, Samantha Markle, who's been clocking this exact pattern for years. And Samantha says flat out what happened that day was no coincidence. Not even close. So here's what we're breaking down today. Exactly what Meghan did, why Samantha says it was a fully deliberate move, and what it actually reveals about the woman behind the carefully polished image. Because when you line up the facts, the timing, the statements, the contradictions, the picture that comes together is something else entirely.
She got with Harry, and fast forward, now she's on the Time 100 list. She's got a kid's book out. She's had a couple of podcasts. I mean, she's now selling jam because it's her jam. I mean, everything that she's got, the 16-bathroom mansion, is all because she, at the right timing, with the right connections at Soho House, basically found Harry and got him to marry her. So yeah, I mean, what woman wouldn't be elevated if that's your goal in life, to be a social climber or a gold digger? She won the lottery.
This story runs way deeper than a missing tooth. To really get why Meghan's move hits so different, you first need to understand what Prince Louis' birthday photos actually mean, not just to the royal family, but to the British public and royal watchers everywhere. Every single year, without fail, the Princess of Wales releases a stunning, thoughtfully composed photo of her children on their birthdays. It's become one of the most beloved traditions in modern monarchy, and people genuinely look forward to it every single year. Fans wait, newspapers clear their front pages, social media goes absolutely wild within minutes of the photos dropping. These aren't just cute snapshots. They're a mother's gift to an entire nation that has watched her children grow up in real time. And on Prince Louis' 7th birthday,
and at the same time to prioritize what we're going to put out as our next tranche of SKUs as equally important to me as Archie losing his first tooth this week, which is about to happen, and I just hope we're back home in time for it.
Catherine delivered once again. The photos hit in the morning, Louis in a blue check shirt, perched on a log in Norfolk, bathed in beautiful natural light. And that smile, that massive gap-toothed grin, missing front teeth, and all pure, unfiltered childhood happiness. You couldn't look at it without smiling back. Within an hour, those images had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. Royal correspondents couldn't stop raving. It was Louis's moment. Full stop, a celebration that belonged entirely to him. And the timing of what happened next? Well, you can decide what to make of that yourself. On that exact same morning, the very morning those birthday photos were flying around the world, Meghan Markle and Prince Harry touched down in New York City for the Time 100 summit.
You only ever see the backs or arms or a limb of Archie and Lily, and they're always around adults, never ever playing with other children. So whenever she mentions the children, it just, I don't know, nothing ever seems to ring true.
One of the most high-profile annual gatherings of names in business, culture, and politics. Now, to be fair, Meghan had been confirmed as a speaker weeks in advance. The schedule was public. She didn't pick the date because of Louis's birthday, or so the argument goes. But that's exactly the question that's had royal commentators split ever since. Because the idea that a woman with Meghan's level of media savvy, backed by a full PR team, simply didn't notice the date she was booked for? A lot of people find that extraordinarily hard to swallow. What's not up for debate is this: Meghan is one of the most experienced media operators on the planet. She's been working the public eye for nearly a decade. She knows.
She is so clearly saying that her priority is Lily over Archie because she is a girl and not a boy.
You got
and
that
the
too.
raising of Archie is all about just ensuring that he's okay for women. It's a very, very odd way to raise a young boy. And it's why we have so much problem today with masculinity.
Of course, he's going to be brought up that everything's going to be toxic masculinity. He needs to be completely pussy whipped like his father. It's just everything to do with Meghan when she talks about the children. Nothing seems real. It doesn't seem like, I don't know, maybe it's a California thing. Maybe it's the sort of people that she's bringing them up with. Maybe it's all this word salad waffle that, you know, they all talk to each other. I mean, even when she talks to her friends, they all seem to be saying the same conversations. It's the same words. And it's going to be a very strange environment for the children in comparison.
Better than almost anyone, that in the media game timing is absolutely everything. She showed up dressed sharp tan linen suit, white button down, looking every inch the polished entrepreneur she's built herself up to be. Harry right there by her side, as usual. Cameras ready and waiting. For one brief window that morning, the world was holding two stories at once: the sweetness of a little boy's birthday portraits in Norfolk, and the Sussexes making their entrance in Manhattan. Then Meghan hit the stage, and everything shifted. She was interviewed by Time's chief executive, and the conversation opened, as it so often does with Meghan, with a carefully framed personal confession. She was asked to share one in the spirit of her podcast, Confessions of a Female Founder, and Meghan, never one to miss a chance to reshape her own narrative, delivered with a beaming smile. Her words? That she is the happiest she has ever been. That of everything that's happened in her life, she never imagined she'd arrive at this point feeling so happy and so grateful. The room applauded, people smiled, and across the Atlantic, royal watchers started reaching for their laptops. Because stop and think about what that actually means. The happiest she has ever been.
But there's no way she raised that tooth line without knowing about Louis.
No, she was in the car as she arrived, and she would have been searching social media, because I do not believe her saying that she doesn't listen to it all. She gets notified if something's important. She does clapbacks, as does Harry. Every tiny little thing appears in a magazine, normally People magazine or whoever they're running to give exclusive. It's the Telegraph of late, isn't it? And every tiny detail, they've done a clapback. And I know that Meghan's on social media, and we know her friends are as well, obviously, because of the crying makeup artist got rather upset with me. But I think she would have been surfing the internet and would have seen that Prince Louis wasn't just trending because it was his birthday.
Happier than her wedding day, that fairy tale ceremony watched by millions. She said she was happier than at the birth of her children, happier apparently than at any single moment across her entire 43 years of life. And yet, not long ago, this same woman sat across from Oprah, telling the world that life inside the royal family had pushed her to the absolute edge. that she felt trapped, isolated, completely unsupported, that her mental health suffered in ways she could barely put into words. Nobody paying attention missed that contrast.
She seems to be obsessed with trying to overshadow Prince Louis's birthday. She does something every single year, but it's the fact that it was to do with his teeth missing. It was toothless, and that's what was going round because he looked absolutely adorable, and lots of people were talking about his toothless grin. Now all of a sudden, it just happened to be the exact same day that Archie is losing his tooth, and he may well be. It could be a coincidence, exactly the same as it's a coincidence that she started merching Princess Charlotte's and Princess Georgia's most famous items of clothing. Nothing with that woman is a coincidence. So yeah, like you said, it was just completely bizarre that she suddenly injected in there randomly about Archie losing a tooth. She's certifiable. She really is.
If she's genuinely the happiest she's ever been, what does that say about the suffering she described so publicly? Was it overstated? Was it a performance? Or has she moved on so completely that none of it matters anymore? Samantha Markle has some very specific thoughts on that, and we'll get there. But first, the moment that truly broke the internet. During her onstage conversation, Meghan brought up her son Archie. She said in her own words that Archie is going to lose his first tooth that very week, and that she just hopes she'll make it back home in time to see it. She said it with a warm laugh, the picture of a devoted mum, and the room found it completely charming. Several outlets ran with it immediately. Meghan reveals adorable Archie milestone. Duchess desperate to get home for son's special moment. Soft, maternal, completely relatable. Exactly the kind of press Meghan's team had been working overtime to generate. But here's where things get really interesting. Because on that very same morning, photos of Prince Louis gap-toothed, grinning.
And I say horror show for him because if he was ever worried about being the spare within the royal family, then just take a look at his face here as he arrived at the time event where he was playing second fiddle as ever to his wife. That's the look on his face when he comes to the understanding that he's not going to get any special treatment now that he's simply a little bit of royal arm candy for Ms. Markle.
Those missing front teeth on full display had already been seen by millions worldwide. Louis's missing teeth were already dominating every headline. Commentators were calling it one of the most endearing details of his entire birthday portrait. And within hours of those images going viral, Meghan Markle was standing on a stage in New York talking about her own child's teeth. Coincidence? Maybe. But let's sit with that for a second. On the one day of the entire year, when the whole world is talking about a royal child's missing teeth, Meghan Markle uses a major global platform to bring up her own child's missing tooth. On the one morning when Louis's birthday has every royal headline locked down, Meghan makes sure her name lands right in that same news cycle. Samantha Markle doesn't buy the coincidence, and she's far from alone. Samantha has spent years in an extraordinarily tough spot. She's the half-sister of one of the most scrutinized women on the planet. She grew up alongside Meghan. She watched her climb through Hollywood. She watched the royal wedding. And she's watched with what she describes as a mix of sadness and frustration, as the version of Meghan presented to the world has drifted further and further from the woman she says she actually knows. Samantha has been openly and consistently critical of Meghan for years. Some dismiss her as a bitter sibling left behind while her half-sister shot to global fame.
He is probably more unhappy than he has ever been in his life. But not if you listen to the top line of Meghan's confession. Watch.
I think confession for you today that I could very comfortably say is I'm the happiest that I've ever been. And that part, to have a partner and a husband who is just so supportive, and to have healthy kids that are so joyful in the freeness of their life and the safety of their life that we create for them. Of all the things that have happened in my life, I never would have imagined getting here at this point. I would feel just so happy and grateful, and I really do.
Of course, she's absolutely at peak happiness, Dan. This is a woman that was being written out of suits, that was running out of time in being able to get other acting roles.
But here's what her supporters keep pointing to: the patterns she's flagged, the warnings she's put out there, have repeatedly proven accurate. She's not just venting, she's describing what she says she knows. And when she looked at what went down on Louis' birthday, the New York summit, the stage appearance, the tooth comment, Samantha wasn't shocked. She was, if anything, completely unsurprised. She says she's seen this exact playbook run before. The pattern, as Samantha tells it, goes like this. Meghan has a sharp, highly developed instinct for sliding into moments that don't belong to her, for finding the spotlight when it's pointing somewhere else entirely and pulling it back. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's subtle, a well-timed appearance, a personal story dropped at just the right moment that mirrors whatever the news cycle is already obsessing over. But on Louis' birthday, Samantha says there was nothing subtle about it. Bringing up a child's tooth, specifically a tooth on the same day the world was already celebrating a royal child's gap-toothed birthday portrait, was, in Samantha's view, a fully deliberate redirect, a calculated move into someone else's moment, and it worked exactly as planned. To understand why critics took this so seriously, you have to zoom out, because this wasn't an isolated incident, according to those who track these things closely. The claim is that Meghan has done this before, repeatedly, and the timing is almost never accidental. Think back to when Harry and Meghan announced their decision to step back from royal duties. No warning, no prior conversation with the palace, none of the standard coordination that royal protocol demands. It landed like a grenade right in the middle of what should have been a period of calm for the institution. The palace was left completely scrambling. Then there was the Oprah interview, its timing dropping while Prince Philip was gravely ill and the country was bracing for the worst.
She knows how to turn on the tears, or she knows how to pretend to be happy, whereas Harry, he can't fake it. He can't fake his misery, his absolute horror. And I will say Meghan is a pretty good liar, because like all of her interviews, and you know I just use that L word now, lies, lies, lies everywhere. Oh, a lot of us. I mean, firstly, Tash, before we get to that, I'm just going to say it. Poor Archie. Archie so desperately needs to be in the UK with his cousins, because don't you just get the sense that Meghan is not going to be happy unless this prince ends up a non-binary with a tongue piercing and purple hair?
The interview aired just weeks before Philip passed. The palace was forced to address deeply personal allegations while simultaneously preparing to grieve the Queen's husband of 73 years. And then the Netflix documentary released during the exact same week the new Princess of Wales was making her first major solo overseas visit. Catherine's Boston trip earned genuinely glowing coverage across the American press. A real triumph. And it was almost immediately buried under the wave of Sussex content Netflix dropped at precisely that moment. A coincidence every single time? Critics say absolutely not. And Samantha Markle says Louis' birthday was simply the latest chapter in a very long, very consistent story. Now, there's another figure in all of this who deserves serious attention, someone who's become increasingly hard to read, standing just off stage while Meghan delivered her performance. Prince Harry. Harry arrived in New York alongside his wife and attended the summit. But make no mistake, this was Meghan's event, Meghan's speech, Meghan's moment. Harry, who was once the bigger half of this duo, who was, after all, the actual prince, has been gradually but unmistakably repositioned over the years. He is no longer the story. She is. He stands slightly behind her at events. He speaks less. He smiles when required. He is, in Hollywood terms, the supportive husband, the backup. In the words of one commentator who covered the summit, Harry has been made the spare all over again, only this time not by the royal family, by his own wife. And here's the detail that really stings. Harry walked away from the royal family, his country, his military career, his entire identity, in part because he said he refused to be reduced to a supporting role. He said he felt invisible, overlooked, sidelined, treated as less important than his brother. And yet there he stood in New York, in Ralph Lauren, quietly watching his wife command center stage, smiling on cue, clapping at the right moments. Looking by more than one account not entirely like a man who found exactly what he was searching for, this was a meticulously designed PR operation, and once you see the moving pieces, the picture becomes crystal clear. At this point, Meghan had a lot riding on her public image. Her Netflix show had aired to mixed reviews, warm in some corners, brutally mocked in others. Her lifestyle brand had just launched, and while some people showed up enthusiastic, it also pulled in a wave of serious ridicule. Her podcast was just getting started. She was, in short, mid-rebuild, and she needed the kind of coverage that reminded the world she was still relevant, still compelling, still worth taking seriously. The Time 100 Summit was the perfect vehicle, high profile, prestigious, photographed and reported on globally. The guest list included genuine heavyweights, a Netflix chief executive, major Hollywood stars, celebrated philanthropists. Just by being in that room, Meghan was positioning herself as their equal. A serious player, someone who belongs on that stage. And the message she delivered was carefully calibrated to hit back at every criticism that had been thrown her way. She is happy pushing back against narratives of Sussex chaos. She is a devoted mother countering whispers about her parenting.
Prince Louis looked so happy with his little toothless grin in the video clip they shared. That's just a normal, healthy child that loves the outdoors, spending time with his family and his cousins. And you see all the other cousins as well interacting. But you only ever see the backs or arms or a limb of Archie and Lily, and they're always around adults, never ever playing with other children. So whenever she mentions the children, it just, I don't know, nothing ever seems to ring true.
And you also just know, and this is why he's a broken man, and again, as you know, Tash, I have zero sympathy for the guy, but that is the type of rhetoric that is constantly put into Harry's head as well. It's like all about me, because I'm the female founder, I'm the woman, you are there for me.
She is grateful, pushing back on the entitlement perception. She is thriving, directly challenging the growing sense that the Sussex brand was losing altitude fast. And that Archie tooth moment, royal commentators say it was the most elegant move of the whole performance. Impossible to attack directly. What kind of person criticizes a mother for mentioning her child? But devastatingly effective at sliding Meghan's name into the trending conversation of that morning. Missing teeth, royal children, Meghan all in the same news cycle, all feeding off each other. Now let's get into what critics have specifically called out as dishonesty, because that's a serious charge and it deserves to be looked at honestly. The core concern raised by royal watchers and Samantha Markle is this: Meghan's public statements about her children don't always line up with what's actually happening behind closed doors. That the image of the ever-present, hands-on, devoted mother doesn't quite square with a schedule that, over the past 2 years, has been relentless in pace and ambition. On stage, Meghan spoke with visible emotion about not wanting to miss Archie's tooth moment, about making her children's milestones a priority. It was warm, it sounded genuine, and it was exactly what a room full of influential people wants to hear from a mother who is also a public figure. But look at the reality of the past year. Podcast launches, Netflix filming schedules, brand launches, summits, galas, New York trips, 2 in a matter of weeks alone. Archie and Lilibet, when they appear publicly at all, show up in carefully controlled glimpses. A photo here, a brief mention there. They are used simultaneously as proof of Meghan's maternal devotion and kept firmly out of public view. Samantha Markle has said consistently and clearly that the Meghan she knows has always been extraordinarily skilled at performing warmth and closeness, at projecting an image of maternal presence that may not always reflect the full picture, that when Meghan talks publicly about her children, there is always a calculation underneath it. That is a serious thing to say about someone. It's also not something that's easy to dismiss, given everything we've seen. There's a dimension to all of this that rarely gets talked about, and it might be the most important one of all. The children themselves. Archie is 6 years old. Lilibet is 3. They didn't choose the life they were born into. They didn't choose the controversy that has surrounded their family since before they were old enough to understand any of it. They didn't choose to grow up thousands of miles from their grandparents, their cousins, their father's entire homeland. And yet, almost from the very beginning, they've been used as characters in a media narrative they cannot possibly comprehend. Archie has been at the center of controversies stretching back to before his birth, questions around his christening, his title, and serious allegations made during that Oprah interview. He's 6 years old, and he's already been placed at the center of a story that the adults around him are still fighting over. And now his first missing tooth, a private, sweet, completely ordinary childhood milestone, has been deployed on a public stage in front of cameras at an event built for maximum media coverage. Not because it slipped out. Meghan doesn't do spontaneous, but because on that particular morning, it served a purpose. Because children grow up. And one day, sooner than anyone expects, Archie will be old enough to search his own name, to read what was written about him, to understand exactly how his childhood was framed, and by whom, and why. That's a day that nobody in Meghan's PR team seems to be thinking about, but Samantha Markle is. One of the most revealing aspects of situations like this is what the palace doesn't say. Because Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace almost never respond directly to anything the Sussexes do, and there's a very deliberate reason for that. Responding would dignify it. It would blow the story up into something bigger than it needs to be. It would hand Harry and Meghan exactly what they want most: the acknowledgement, the relevance, the confirmation that what they say and do still lands inside those ancient walls. And so the palace stays silent. William and Catherine released their birthday photographs, celebrated their son's day, and said absolutely nothing about what was unfolding across the Atlantic. It was, in its own quietly powerful way, an act of extraordinary dignity. Because you can be certain that behind closed doors, the people managing the royal family's communications were watching events in New York with something considerably less than admiration. The thinking, as those close to the institution have described it, comes down to this: the monarchy has stood for over 1,000 years. It will outlast this. The traditions, the institutions, the deep and genuine affection the British public holds for the working royals, none of that has been fundamentally shaken by the Sussex departure. But that doesn't mean the wounds aren't real. And it doesn't mean the timing of a certain New York appearance on a certain day went unnoticed by the people who notice everything. Samantha Markle's take on what happened on Louis's birthday sits inside a much bigger framework, because Samantha hasn't simply been reacting to individual events as they come. For years, she has been laying out what she describes as a fundamental truth about her half-sister's character. One she believes the world is only slowly starting to see. The argument Samantha makes in interviews, in her book, in public statements, is that for Meghan, being the center of the story is not just a desire. It is a necessity, not occasionally. Not only when the cameras are rolling, always. It is, Samantha says, not simply a flaw, but a defining characteristic, something woven into Meghan's identity at its deepest level. She grew up, Samantha says, in an environment where attention was the most valuable currency, where performing for an audience, even just the audience of her immediate family, was how love and validation were earned and kept. And those early patterns, Samantha argues, don't just vanish when the cameras become real cameras and the audience becomes millions of people worldwide. And here's the part of Samantha's argument that makes people genuinely uneasy. She says Meghan doesn't even necessarily experience it as strategy, that it is so instinctive, so deeply embedded, that it happens without conscious calculation. That the drive to pull attention back toward herself is simply how Meghan moves through the world, as natural to her as breathing. Whether you find that more or less troubling than deliberate scheming, that's entirely for you to decide. We should be careful not to project emotions onto people who haven't expressed them publicly. We cannot know with certainty how King Charles feels watching his younger son stand quietly to the side at his wife's public events. We cannot know what Prince William thinks when yet another news cycle that should belong to his family gets interrupted by something coming out of California. What we can say with real confidence is that the relationship between the Sussexes and the rest of the royal family remains deeply, perhaps permanently fractured. The reconciliation so many hoped for, the gradual healing, the eventual reunion, it hasn't happened. And with every passing month, it looks less and less like it ever will. King Charles, by all accounts, hasn't entirely let go of his son. Sources suggest there's still tenderness there, a father's love that persists even through bewilderment and profound hurt. But the terms of any reconciliation, as far as the palace is concerned, have always been clear. Harry would need to return to Britain, re-engage with royal life in some meaningful form, and most critically bring to an end the sustained public criticism that has defined the Sussex years since their exit. None of that looks even remotely close to happening. Harry has a life in California. His children are settled there. His wife's entire brand, everything she has built, everything she has invested in, is constructed on the story of their escape from an institution that failed them. To go back would be to admit, at least implicitly, that the story they've told the world isn't the whole truth. And for someone as deeply invested in her own narrative as Meghan Markle, that may simply be too high a price to ever pay. Zoom all the way out. And what happened on Louis's birthday is really a miniature version of the entire Sussex story, a study in contrasts that has been playing out in one form or another since the day Meghan Markle first stepped into Prince Harry's world. On one side, the royal family, ancient, measured, bound by duty and tradition, releasing a birthday photo of a little boy on a log, letting the image speak entirely for itself, asking for nothing in return but a moment of shared national joy. On the other, Meghan Markle, ambitious, media-savvy, relentlessly strategic, stepping onto a stage in New York, delivering a perfectly calibrated message of happiness and maternal devotion, making sure her name lands in the same news cycle as her nephew's birthday, whether by design or by the deeply ingrained instinct Samantha describes. The irony, and Samantha has noted this with a particular kind of exhaustion, is that Meghan would almost certainly push back on every single word of this. She would say she is simply living her life, making appearances she was invited to make, talking honestly about her family, being a mother in public the way any public figure is a mother in public, and perhaps somewhere inside the version of events that exists in Meghan's own mind, there is no strategy at all, no calculation, no pattern. Perhaps the tooth comment, the summit, Louis's birthday, all of it really was one enormous coincidence. But if you've been watching this story as long as many of us have, if you've seen the same patterns repeat, the same timing recur, the same mechanisms kick in every time the spotlight threatens to drift away from Meghan and towards someone else, it becomes increasingly difficult to believe that. And Samantha Markle has never believed it, not for a single day. Prince Louis turned 7. He had a birthday, presumably with cake and chaos and all the wonderful noise of a little boy celebrating with the people who love him most. He flashed that gap-toothed smile for photographs his parents will treasure for the rest of their lives. Archie Harrison, somewhere in Montecito, had his very own visit from the Tooth Fairy for the very first time right around that same week. A small, sweet, entirely private childhood moment that in any other family would have come and gone without a single person outside those four walls ever knowing it happened. A little boy waking up excited, checking under his pillow, finding whatever the going Montecito rate is for a first lost tooth. Pure, simple childhood magic. Whether his mother made it home in time, we simply don't know. What we do know is that millions of people around the world heard about it because Meghan made sure of that. She took that private milestone, that intimate family moment, and placed it deliberately on one of the most watched stages in the world. And she did it on the very morning that another child's missing teeth were already dominating every headline on the planet. 2 little boys. 2 missing teeth. 2 very different childhoods unfolding in the long shadow of an institution that will outlast every single one of us. And 2 mothers, one who released a photograph and stepped quietly back into the Norfolk countryside, and one who stepped onto a Manhattan stage and made absolutely sure the world was paying attention. Now, let's really sit with what this all means, because the tooth story, as charming and seemingly innocent as it sounds, is actually a perfect window into something much larger. Something that has been building for years and shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. Think about the mechanics of what happened that morning. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, did what she always does. She released a beautiful, carefully composed photograph of her son. She let the image speak. She asked for nothing. She made no appearance, gave no interview, issued no statement. She simply gave the world a glimpse of a little boy growing up, and then she stepped back. That is the royal way. Understated, dignified, entirely focused on the child rather than the mother. And within hours, without a single direct reference to Louis, without mentioning his name, without acknowledging his birthday in any way, Meghan Markle had inserted herself and her family into that exact same conversation, not by accident, not by coincidence. By deploying, with surgical precision, the one detail that would guarantee her name would trend alongside images of a gap-toothed royal birthday boy. Samantha Markle, when she heard about the tooth comment, says she felt something she describes not as anger, but as a deep, bone-tired recognition. She says, "This is the pattern. This is exactly what I have been describing for years, and here it is again, playing out in front of the entire world. And the frustrating thing," Samantha says, "is that it works every single time. The media covers it, the headlines write themselves, the clicks roll in. And Meghan moves on to the next moment, the next appearance, the next carefully placed revelation, leaving everyone else to argue about whether it was intentional. But here is what makes this particular moment land differently than some of the others. It involves children, 2 of them. And that changes the conversation in a way that deserves to be addressed directly and honestly. Prince Louis did not ask to be photographed. He is 7 years old. He sat on a log in Norfolk because his mother asked him to, and he smiled that enormous smile because that is apparently just who Louis is, a kid overflowing with joy and energy and personality. Those photographs were released with love, as a gift, as a tradition. They were not meant to be ammunition in anyone's media war. They were not meant to be the backdrop against which another family's milestone would be strategically positioned. And Archie, sweet, curious, growing up fast Archie, who lost his first tooth somewhere in Montecito, who almost certainly had no idea that this completely ordinary childhood event was about to become an international news story. He is 6 years old. He deserved to have that moment belong entirely to him and to his family. Instead, it became content. It became a talking point. It became a tool in a carefully managed media strategy designed to keep his mother relevant and visible at precisely the right moment. That is the part of this story that Samantha Markle says keeps her up at night. Not the politics of it, not the media strategy, not even the impact on the royal family. It is the children, because children grow up faster than anyone is ever ready for. And one day, one absolutely guaranteed, unavoidable day, Archie Harrison is going to be old enough to understand all of this. He is going to search his own name. He is going to find the headlines. He is going to read that his mother stood on a stage in New York and used his first lost tooth as a media moment on the very morning that his cousin's birthday photographs were going viral around the world. What does a young man do with that information? How does he process being told, in effect, that his most private childhood moments were being managed and deployed before he was old enough to have any say in the matter whatsoever? These are not comfortable questions. They are not questions that Meghan's PR team appears to be losing any sleep over, but they are questions that will eventually demand answers, not from commentators, not from royal watchers, but from Archie himself. The question of what Meghan intended will likely never be definitively answered. She is not in the habit of confirming the strategies her critics attribute to her. In fact, she is very much in the habit of doing the opposite, of presenting every move as natural, every appearance as organic, every personal revelation as simply an honest moment of human connection, rather than a calculated insertion into a pre-existing news cycle. And perhaps, on some level, that is genuinely how she experiences it. Perhaps in the world as Meghan sees it, there is no strategy, there is no calculation. There is simply a woman living her life, accepting invitations, sharing moments, being present. Perhaps the timing of the summit, the tooth comment, Louis's birthday perhaps in her mind, it really is all coincidence. A remarkable, recurring, almost mathematically improbable series of coincidences that just happen to benefit her narrative every single time. But Samantha Markle is in the habit of telling us what she sees. And what she sees, she says, is a woman who has spent her entire adult life ensuring the world looks at her even, and perhaps especially, when the world was already looking at someone else. Samantha says she's watched this play out from up close for decades. She says the mechanics are always the same, even if the specifics change. Find the moment, find the spotlight, find the angle, and move. Whether that makes Meghan a calculating media operator, a product of a difficult and complicated upbringing that shaped her relationship with attention and validation in ways that even she may not fully understand, or simply a woman doing what comes entirely naturally in a world that rewards exactly this kind of behavior that, as always, is entirely for you to decide. We are not here to hand down verdicts. We are here to lay out the facts, the patterns, the timelines, and the perspectives of people who have been watching this story from the inside for years. What we can say is this: the royal family released a photograph of a little boy on a log. They asked for nothing. They said nothing about what was happening across the Atlantic. They let the image speak, and then they went back to their lives. And in doing so, they demonstrated something that no summit appearance, no stage performance, no perfectly timed personal revelation can manufacture, and that is the kind of quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and having absolutely nothing to prove to anyone. Prince Louis turned 7. He had a birthday, presumably with cake and beautiful chaos and all the wonderful noise of a little boy celebrating with the people who love him most. He flashed that enormous gap-toothed smile for photographs his parents will treasure for the rest of their lives. And somewhere across the Atlantic, Archie Harrison lost his first tooth, and the whole world was informed about it before the tooth fairy had even made her visit. 2 little boys, 2 missing teeth. One story that says more about the fault lines running through this extraordinary, complicated, utterly compelling royal saga than almost anything else that has happened in recent memory. And something tells us this is far from the last chapter. If this video resonated with you, hit that like button right now. It genuinely makes a massive difference and helps this story reach people who need to hear it. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Share it with someone who follows the royal world, because trust us, they will have thoughts. Drop your take in the comments below. We read them, we see you, and we want to know what you think. We will see you in the next one.